Hi everyone, and sorry for the delay. So for people that are watching this online, welcome. Here today it's a very important presentation. So very glad our students give them some advice and some very interesting that we help them because they are the teacher of a very important project in research. It's what we will present today. So we see today 7 games, very different, very interesting, and that represent a lot of work by this team. So it's the alpha version. Alpha version for people that are not used to game creation. It's the game with the entire content of the final game. That's what we are from today. But it will be presented in the and I will remember that today we will have some texture or visual that are not final one. That's completely normal. The use here are 1 month to finish it after this presentation. So I will not do a long prediction because we are already late. Please implement firstly our
Today we are going to be presenting to you our game Oursong. Oursong is a 3D puzzle platformer with a light-hearted story, low-poly cartoon aesthetic about reconnecting with the memory of your lost grandfather. In the game, your grandfather has passed away and has left his music shop to you and your mother. You are taking your last look through the shop before you sell it to a larger corporation to take it over. As you go through the shop, you touch instruments and are transported into a fantasy world in which you find memories of your grandfather within your instruments that you interact with.
What big memory into the line of sight. The player is eased into the world of Oursong. With the main menu being the outside looking in framing of the music shop, calmed by the swaying wind chimes, the little jingle of the doorbell tells the player that a little more is waiting within. And with a click, and with a click, you enter the shop, which is interacting with the various instruments around the now deserted room. The vibe is one of a little bittersweet sonnet. But as you play through the game, you're going to discover that the main character's grandfather has imbued love into music, and how that's influenced the people who knew the little shop at the end of the boulevard. All the while, you're surrounded by that same music in the worlds you explore, hopefully moving you in the same way that it moved the very many people that were touched by the grandfather's kind soul. Finally, the low poly aesthetic of Oursong combines with the vast scenes to showcase the expansive worlds that music will take you to. These worlds might be imaginary, but they can be warm, cold, bright, dark, or anything in between. Because the first level, the level we're going to be showcasing today, is the one about the power of the violin. The music will sound like a violin, and it will feature stringed instruments, embodying the orchestral section of music. The subtle hum of the strings resonating within the wood that is the chorus will hopefully make you feel the same emotions that the people that were influenced by the grandfather.
The art style of Oursong is low poly and simple. This is consistent with 2D and 3D art. This art style helps the player feel connected to the lighthearted and fun aspects of the game. The player has interactive animation for walking, jumping, and using their attack. During every level, the player will have a cape on to signify that they are in a fantasy world and no longer in the real world. While in the music shop, which is the level select screen, they will not have this cape or their tuning fork to represent that they are in the normal world. While in the music shop, the player can also look around and see posters like the one on the slide above, and these posters will help the player feel connected to the story, as each poster has something that the grandfather did in his life, and it will help the player feel connected to the narrative and environmental storytelling.
Throughout Oursong, the player actively takes part in making music. With the conductor towers as the player's instrument, they will recreate musical pieces found within the world. Each of these brown blocks represents a unique musical note in the musical phrase at a specific time, and the player will orient the conductor tower to the intended note that will be in the completed piece.
So a little bit about the enemies. They're very cutesy looking because their uh, their source is this natural note, but they're, as you can tell, they look a bit different. One's a little more sharp, and the other one has a flat sort of armor, and this is by design, as these are notes that don't quite fit within the harmony of the world, and they're sour notes basically. And so each of these sour notes can be approached differently through the game, as you'll see from Nate later. Now for the demo. So right as you boot up into the game, you'll see that you get that outside-in approach that I was talking about. And then as you click on the doors, the player walks in and you're greeted with a level select, which doesn't look like a normal level select. It's just walking around the shop.
So the player in our game can move using the WAS and D keys in any direction. Additionally, they can use the mouse to determine where they're going to walk, and this also has controller support built into it. The character can interact with things around it by looking at them. As you can see, the closest thing to to the player that's interactable is highlighted, and the player can talk to it or interact with the world objects by clicking. So the way that the character jumps, the longer you hold down the jump button, the higher you will jump, which allows the player to change how they're interacting and choose to jump farther when they need to for platforming things. As you can see that the player is standing on are interactable. When you interact with them, you can freeze or make them continue to move, which allows you to complete these puzzle sections more easily, as you can make these moving platforms stop for a moment to allow you to jump to them.
So, as the player ascends to the second floor of the cave, here we can note some of the other different things within the game. To the left, you can see a music stand, which which we use as the aesthetic for our checkpoints. And then if you look, there are some of the different music blocks, as I call them, have different uh, different colors, and they mark a different kind of block. The blue that you saw earlier would be the freeze blocks, and uh, the sort of the orange block you can see ahead of you is a horizontal block, and the purple one up there is a vertical block. These two blocks function differently from as they don't freeze, but you want them to move. But you want them to move to a left or right point. You would use the sharp or flat notes corresponding to them.
There are two types of enemies that we call sour notes that the player will interact with in Oursong. So there's the black note, which is the blue one, and the sharp note, which is the red one. These are its effective notes that have been soured, and the player has to purify them in order to achieve the flat notes notes have to be hit by the sharp accidental, and the sharp notes have to be hit by the flat accidental. And the player has to be careful not to hit the enemy with the corresponding accidental, otherwise it will increase in size. And so as the enemy's size decreases, uh, it will turn into a friendly note, which will play a song to show its pure advice.
Here the player is going to attempt their first puzzle, and it functions as I described earlier, but we'll kind of walk you through that. Basically, this note is going to introduce that they've created a song for the player to play using this instrument called a conductor tower. The note next to this note that we're currently talking to is the one that actually tells you what song to play and will verify if you've correctly done so. The player can talk to the taller note or the note on the elevated platform to hear that sound, and then we'll go through each of these receiver blocks to verify which note each receiver corresponds to, and you can interact with these directly, allowing you to complete the puzzle. As you also can see, each of these conductor blocks, the octagons in the middle to represent the 7 notes plus a rest note, are controlled by these buttons outside that the player is able to interact with in order to rotate each conductor. Through the combination of testing which block plays which note and orienting the conductor properly, the player is essentially creating music in the game and functionally playing an instrument. Here we can see the player going back to actually hear the song again, just to verify that they know which note they're intended to play. So you can go back and repeatedly listen to the song as many times as you need to verify this. When you're done, you ask the note to make sure that you've created the right musical sequence, which you can see represented by the emitter or the conductors actually emitting these things. And when you correctly get the note correct, the phrase correct, it will play a succession and an extension of the notes that you use to solve the puzzle and create the musical piece. In this case, it also removes a very obvious obstacle in the level, which you can clearly see. And now Junji can tell you a little bit more about the music of the world.
Okay, as we have shown, the sound is a crucial part of the game and the experiences. Since the narrative is centered around the music and the puzzle mechanic is also related to the sound. As much, the music is composed with that in mind. And the game is utilized the composed track to invoke the proper emotion.
So, as I'm sure you see around the environment, it's very low poly and very sort of cartoony, and that's again on purpose. It should be a place that's very vast and huge, and I hope you got that impression from the pan up into the huge tree in the beginning. But it should also have a sort of significance to it because, in essence, this uh, the player, the main character, is traversing the world that the grandfather's music brought brought his students to and the people that he impacted to. And you can see as well, right here, as well as in the past, that there are little fungal platforms growing on the trees to kind of not jut out of the environment as much and still blend in, but have a connection to the the outer scenery that feels natural. And there we go, completing our second puzzle, and the second barrier is now down. Only one remains.
Also, for the sound effects, it's aimed to be airy, magical, and light, in order to further pull the player into the musical world. Therefore, the sound effect in the game will not sound like the 8-bit style. Instead, it will sound more instrumental. And Unity has the positional audio, which translates into different channels to maximize the user experience. We are using the 3D audio to maximize the environmental aspects of the music, and only include the puzzle and the enemy sounds where necessary. We also have the region audio to have the different soundtracks depends on the position where player character is located in the level.
As mentioned earlier, at the end of every level, there will be a memory for the player to view relating to their grandfather, which we will see once the player reaches the top of the level.
The first level completed. There we go. Awesome. And so next up, we want to show you a little sneak peek of what's to come.
This is so what we have here is what we call Piano Mountain. This level is sort of a expansion on some of the ideas as we were playing with in the first violin level, where the violin level ended with a short segment where you ascended a tree. If you see coming up in the video, you can see a white and black path. This is supposed to be more, more focused on the ascension than the tree level is, and there'd be and while the first level is very linear in nature, um, the different paths would allow for just multiple ways to proceed through and to scale the mountain to reach the temple that you see that you're about to see come up above.
All right, and we're the Oursong team. Thank you so much. Any questions?
So, oh, well, I will start, but today I will not ask a lot of questions because you already hear me many times in the class. So it's good to keep the time for other people. So I want to know, so first, it's really amazing. It's really beautiful. The music work well with the visual aesthetic. So all of this, it make a lot of sense. So me, I from I see what what could become a good 3D platformer, adventure platformer. Uh, but I want to hear a bit more. What is the connection with the music? So we have it in the theme, but how it works in the gameplay? Why this game is so specific than other, more specific than other 3D platformer?
The game is about exploring these musical worlds inspired by both instruments and narratively the grandfather's involvement in your life and music. As the player is going through it and like solving these puzzles and experiencing these sour notes, the player is actively experiencing the world that the grandfather showed them, but they've since forgotten. This is a musical theming, and specifically in the violin level, we took the inspiration of the forests and the woods because we thought that it was really impactful to consider this like massive landscape for just one tiny instrument because that's what music is. It's you take one thing, you start from it, and you build and build and build until you have this very impressive like piece of existence. You go like with our violin tree, which is the center tree you see, we took the inspiration of the strings being along the trunk, and obviously that's very symbolic, but it's also very literal. Like this, just because the violin is in the level physically doesn't mean the entire level isn't the violin. So that's how the whole level is ultimately connecting to this idea of music and the identity as an instrument.
No, yeah, loud, speak loud.
I was curious what other kinds of gameplay you guys have. I mean, I just saw the moving blocks that you guys created and the tower, and I was wondering if for a level like the piano mountain, if there is any other kind of like puzzle.
We've been considering more creative ways of using the piano or the moving blocks to beyond just platforming, but also using them to actually uh, block projectiles or like stopping line of sight between the enemies, that kind of thing. So we'd be keeping the same core mechanic, but encouraging the player to use them in different ways.
You have a question? I have a question. The blocks, are the different colors, like they go in different directions or something? How do the different colored blocks work?
Yeah, they all operate differently. The blue blocks are intended to move, well, they don't go in different directions, but they do operate differently. The blue blocks move back and forth on a loop, and you can freeze or unfreeze them in that loop. The purple blocks start in a location and then travel to an end location when they're activated, and the orange blocks are functionally just blocks that are there. They exist as platforms, but they're kind of outside of the existence of the world, so that's why they maintain this more like mechanized view.
How many levels are you guys planning to do?
Right now, we just intend on having the two levels, the one we showcased today and the mountain level, which we teased, just given the scope of everything.
Actually not a bit, it was really hard to read, especially from where I was at, like the lighter areas, it was almost impossible to read. Whereas that's like a light on light text on a light background.
Maybe that's a good suggestion.
Do we have any question online or on YouTube? So, wait a few seconds.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question about the, by the way, great progress. This looks really nice, and I have a bunch of comments for you. But about the two-dimensional narrative interlude, the sort of the memory interlude that was towards the end. Can you explain a little bit how it's integrated into the gameplay? Because right now it seems to have a little bit of like a jump abrupt transition from the 3D environment into this sort of memory lane narration. And if you can talk about a little bit about that.
It's actually intended to be a little bit outside of the gameplay because while the musical world is experiencing what your grandfather's effect on like music and the world around you, the memory is how it specifically affected you. It's this kind of like I forgot about this, and by exploring this world, I uncover something that is separate from this world, and you reach this culmination that is separate from the experience that you actively had in the world.
Okay, so thank you. It was a wonderful presentation. And so we'll pass to the next one, Escape.
Hello guys, this is Tim Escape, and I'm gonna share my screen for our slides and gameplay. So, hello guys, this is Tim Escape, and here we are making a horror game. So, in order to make this horror game, we mainly focus on these 5 elements: environment, mechanism, art style, sound effect, and map design. For each element, we have created a lot of things like lighting, texture, and for mechanics, we are mainly focusing on human versus zombies. We choose a realistic art style because we want the atmosphere to be as horrible as possible. And we also created many sound effects that might fit in all kinds of situations. The map design is unclosed and narrow, which we will have a more clear look when we step to actual gameplay. So this is a first-person 3D game, and the player's goal is to collect all 3 documents, which shows the dark secret of the lab, and the player then needs to start the nuclear bomb, and before the nuclear bomb is fully activated, he needs to go to the elevator room to escape. There are many actions or choices the player can choose. For example, he can pick up items in order to defend himself and pick up documents which is needed to unlock the nuclear room. And the player also needs to stay away from the zombie, or if he has a weapon on his head, he can stun the zombie. And then he will be able to unlock and escape. So we have a background story and with our scriptwriter and designer Joe to explain about the story.
The story is that the player character is a low-ranked scientist who works for a biotech research group whose goal is to perfect the human form. However, one of the experiments accidentally broke loose. And in the shoes and through the eyes of this lowly lab worker, faced with a flesh-hungry mutant looking for its next meal, can you activate the lab's nuclear bomb and escape?
So, and this is a map design for our game. We will step into the actual gameplay now, so we will all have a more clear view of it. This is a start screen. We are having a very simple UI for it right now, but we are definitely going to improve it later. So the player is born in such kind of lab. You can see the flickering light here, which indicates that there might be some, for example, evil experiments. And here is a weapon the player can interact with. You can pick it up, and when you meet a zombie, it will be a very meaningful, useful way to protect yourself. So you can see, oh, here is a zombie, a little bit too fast. But the zombie is actively seeking for the human player. But since there is fog, you can consider that as some kind of gas leaking. It's trying to attack us. You can see that we have a health bar at the left bottom corner of the UI. So you could either run away from the zombie, or if you have a weapon like I do, you can go close to it and then press down it. So Combat system is kind of tricky right now as we are still working on it, but yeah, it's kind of hardcore. So here you can see that this is the, I need to run over, sorry. Let's start over. This time we will try to avoid the zombie. So this is the nuclear room we need to enter to activate the nuclear weapon. And here is the place you can interact to open the door. You can see that we currently have no documents in our inventory. So we need to collect all 3 documents to open the zombie here. The zombie comes. We need to collect all 3 documents to in order to open the room. And here you can see that we can interact with the document. We currently just have some placeholder for it, but in later we will implement the actual story to the document, so the player would be able to have a clear view of what the background story is inside the game. And here is, I think this is a, yeah, this is a second lab. So there is also a weapon you can collect here. So this is the elevator room, which is used for the player to escape after having activated the nuclear weapon. Oh, and I think, oh yeah, here is the CCTV room. So you can see that there's a monitor here, which shows a lively fading image from the camera outside. It is here. So since there is currently nothing there, the image is kind of still, but it's actually lively fading. And if there is zombie walking by, or if there is a document or weapon placed there, you can get information from the CCTV. So the CCTV room could be a really important source for the human players in order to stay safe and collect items. Oh, I'm kind of sorry, I have 3D hint and I'm kind of lost here. So you can see from the left bottom corner that we already have 2 documents, and we just need to find the last one. I don't know who placed the document, so I will take some time to find it. It's very easy to get lost here, which adds to the atmosphere, horrible atmosphere. Where is the last one? Oh. I'm trying to avoid this guy. So you can see that there is really a drawback that we do not have enough CCTV cameras placed around the map. So in the finished game, we would have more cameras and more screens to show us this information. And for now, let's just explore. I'm kind of nervous because of the atmosphere, and this kind of feeling that I'm looking for things and a zombie is chasing after me also makes me more nervous. I think this will be an important factor that how this game is horrible to the players. Oh, here I find it. Yeah, and this is the chem lab, which is the birthplace for zombies. You can see that the zombie like broke the cage and escaped from the cage. This must be some kind of gas that's leaking, creating this kind of fog here in the this kind of fog here in the building, the maze. So we need to go back to the nuclear room now. Let's look again. What is going wrong? Oh, here it is. So we have successfully opened the door. As you can see that from the left bottom corner, we have selected our 3 documents. And this is the nuclear room, which is not yet designed. It's actually fully implemented, but we haven't done some functions there, so we are going to improve it later, and there will be more interactions, and player will be able to explore the nuclear room, like it's placed here, and activate the nuclear bomb. So yeah, this is our gameplay, and this is the model for human with textures. Since this game is first person, it's hard to see the model inside the game, but we can have a more clear view here. And this is a model for zombie and its back. This is the animations for human. Animations for zombie. And this is the tunnel we are using. The left is the tunnel in game, and the right is the one we are still building. And this is a CCTV room here. So in future, we are going to have more screens and monitors and cameras in order to show the player more information. And this is a nuclear room. We didn't get into it in the gameplay, but we will later fully implement it and make it more interesting. So this is the elevator room that the player needs to escape to when the player has activated the nuclear bomb. Lab 1, Lab 2, Chem Lab, which we have all seen in the game and the UI. So here are some music loops. We only implemented the first loop, which is the BGM inside the game. We're still working on the transaction between BGMs. Like when we are entering into a combat, the BGM will switch into a more tension one, for example. The combat music, and when zombie finds human. This is part of this one's my favorite because it's really intense and rapid. And these are sound effects we made for zombies in order to make it sound more natural. So how this game will be so interesting? In this game, we do not play safe. You can see that there are many strategies the player could take. There is a risk-reward decision. If the human wants to collect more documents, he needs to risk himself to explore the map, thus increasing his chances to encounter with the zombie. And there are also interesting mechanisms like CCTVs. And so for now, the CCTV, we still have some more functions yet not come for the CCTV. For example, in the future, the human can interact with CCTVs to lock or unlock doors. Each room would have a door, and by controlling the CCTV room, the human player would be able to control the doors, thus preventing zombies and giving himself access to documents. And we also have a tense atmosphere for the game. So why do I need to play it? This game is short but intense. It's very suitable for example, when you break, you want to play something that is intense and have a break, you can play the game. And we have numerous strategies for the players to take. And there are frequent encounters. So for now, we only have one zombie in the map. But in the future, we are trying to implement more enemies, more zombies in the game, and make them more interesting, make the AI more interactive. Also have attractive stories and sounds and art style. So here is our producer list. We are fully remote this semester, so it's great job, everyone. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Okay. So one thing that I would like to add for people who are watching online, that this team meet a lot of technical issue, and so the game was supposed to be a bit bigger with networking and symmetric gameplay. But unfortunately, for technical issue, they hasn't been able to present and even to do everything. It's what happened really often in game creation. So based on that, I really like the fact that you reorient, change a bit the gameplay, change a bit what will be the game. And so I will have just two questions. The first one you already almost answered, but according to you, what makes you think that this game can become popular? And now, what are the most attractive aspects of your game, and for what kind of player? So that's the first question. And the second one is about the CCTV. And I want to know if the design of the CCTV mechanic implied some change in the graphic design. By that I mean, did you change something about I don't know, the light on the scene? Did you change something about the visual of the zombie? So that's the second question.
Yeah, so for the first question, I think the game could be really attractive to one kind of player. For example, there are players who want to have a super intense and quick gameplay, and so this game mainly you can see from my gameplay that it spends about 10 minutes to finish a round, and it could be very intense, and there are numerous strategies for the human player to take. For example, he can either try to defend himself or play passively, like escape from the zombie and collect all documents while trying not to miss the zombie, or he could collect all the weapons in order to stun the zombie, creating more chances for him to, this could be considered as an action game instead of an escape game. So the game style could vary, depends on the player. I think that's an interesting point. And the second question for the CCTV, so just yesterday, after some version control problem, the old CCTV system was no longer functioning, which could be a very serious technical issue for us. So I managed to find a way to implement the CCTV in another way using Unity's new features, but it's not working as good as what we had before. So I'm still trying to figure out what's the changes that might have caused the problem. And since the current CCTV monitor could be too dark for the player to see the actual content, we might design some new lightings in the CCTV room in order to let the player have a more clear view.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can, yeah. So we have some question in the room. Oh, yeah.
So I have a question about the audio design. So in your game currently, you had like a super like synthy, spooky vibe like that was playing, and some of the audio you showed, I think it was for like the attack battle scene, was super orchestral. Was that like an intentional choice to like make your audio like, I don't know? It seems like super different. Like one is super synthy and spooky, and one is like orchestral violin. So yeah, can you guys talk a bit about that?
So for the choices of music, we have a really wonderful musician. We have two really wonderful musicians, and so at first our game is we want our game to be networking, and actually there will be a zombie player and a human player. But later we have to change our plan according to technical issues. So there are different styles of BGMs in the game, but since we are now focusing on the human players only, we are choosing the most suitable BGMs for the human. So the reason why the BGMs could be orchestra is because we want it to be more epic. We want to rise the players' interest and insist and feelings as quickly as possible. So we choose orchestra in order to realize that.
I have a question because the game is very, very dark. At any point, did you consider giving the player the ability to create kind of a light source, like a flashlight, in order to help them explore, or did you intentionally make it completely dark with no real way of guiding yourself around?
Yeah. So both points make sense. Actually, yeah, we are working on how to make the player to have a more clear view, and we are also working on the environment lighting. So we want the room to be dark, but for now it might be too dark for the player to see. So we might adjust it to the suitable light, level. Yeah, we might adjust the lighting to a suitable level in the future. Sorry, we are going to, not might. Thanks.
As you did is super impressive. But like my question is, I might have missed it, but is there a run mechanic? And if so, like, do you plan on giving a stamina gauge to a player, or is that like, what are your thoughts on
Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't understand. Sorry, man.
that? So is there like a sprint or a run mechanic as it stands right now in the game, or is there plans for that? Just out of curiosity.
I think this is a question for our designer. Joy, could you answer this question?
Currently, no. I would say we don't really have a run in the game right now.
Yeah, but we do have some animations. So I think we need to adjust our AI for the zombie if we want it to run, and we need to adjust our human controller. We do want it to run. So later we may design for example, a strength bar for the controller. So running consumes strength, and the strength would be regenerated like from slowly. We will have it. Thanks.
I will just take one of the. Sorry, I have to change the setting again. Yeah. So
I
So
see there's a question in the chat.
yeah, so on the chat you have a lot of comments that are really relevant. So thank you for all of these comments. So I will share with your team after the class. But there are one question is like the question is the layout for the level procedurally generated? So I know the answer for that, but what do you think about that?
So Suyan is our level designer, and maybe Joey, could you answer that question since you are the designer and Siri? Could you answer that question?
The thing I want to know is, did you consider that option? Why? And what was your decision?
To be honest, we're still discussing about that point. We haven't got a decision yet. So,
And can you repeat that question?
Yes. So, but I have to switch the. So the question was: is the layout for the level procedurally generated? So the answer is no. But my question with that is: did you consider that option to make level procedurally generated? And what was your thought about that?
A procedurally generated level. I thought of it more as something like, from my experience, Resident Evil, or although I haven't played it that much, the SCP game. Not so much randomly generated, but yeah, not procedurally generated for our game.
thanks.
So the next presentation, the next game will be
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
and exactly share it. And exactly share it.
All right, we are Savior of Dreams, and we are creating the first DDRPG. It's a blend of adventure and rhythm game. Functionally, it is a DDR dance pad style game, and as you can see, or you probably can see because of how the camera's set up, we actually have a DDR pad with us today, and we'll take you through how the controls work. The DDR pad is our main controller. Everything in our game is done with just effectively 4 buttons. It's a blend of adventure and rhythm game. Functionally, it is a DDR dance pad style game, and as you can see, or you probably can see because of how the camera's set up, we actually have a DDR pad with us today, and we'll take you through how the controls work. The DDR pad is our main controller. Everything in our game is done with just effectively 4 buttons. Look, are you there? All right, I'll just cover for that then. So, welcome to the world of Fontanoa, where the biggest threat is a disease-like infliction called petrification, caused by succumbing to one's fears. It is the main force of distress that many creatures have fought against. While this infliction has been suppressed by the magical instrument knights, it runs rampant in Groveland, where an ancient evil has awoken. Leah, the rabbit, the main character, is a traveling bard who finally decides to visit her homeland after receiving a message from her father. When she arrives, the land is covered in a dark mist, and the inhabitants have fallen into a deep sleep, consumed by their night terrors. With her lyre, she's able to pull them awake, but will she be able to defeat the strongest terror of them all, the nightmare? It's a horse. In this dance pad-inspired 2D rhythm game, the controller, play as the special instrument knight named Leo as you fend off against the encroaching nightmares, reawakened in their most dangerous forms. Put together a band of knights and fight back the darkness with the power of music. So in Savior of Dreams, there are two main elements to gameplay: the visual novel-style overworlds and the Dance Dance Revolution-style combat. There are multiple characters or interactable objects in the overworld scenes, and by using the left and right arrows, the player can focus on a particular object or character. When initiating conversation with the up arrow, or observing an object, a visual novel-esque dialogue system pops up as the player progresses through the story. Characters emote, animate, and jump around as they take you through everything. When it is time to jump into the nightmare, a menu will appear next to the sleeping characters. This pre-battle menu allows the player to adjust the difficulty levels, choose the support partner they have equipped, and change the speed of the charts as they go down. From this menu, the player will also be able to see a recommended level, and after each battle, they will be gaining a certain amount of experience, and from that experience, you level up and get stronger.
From dark and gloomy to a more relaxing and positive tune, reflecting how the nightmares were captured. Each of our three areas will have similar musical representations, with the music changing after an area boss is defeated. Each boss song will be tense and full of energy and uncertainty, matching the tone of the nightmare that you'll fight. So being able to hear a relaxing melody after the toughest fights acts as a satisfying respite. Dark and gloomy to a more relaxing and positive tune, reflecting how the nightmares were captured. Each of our three areas will have similar musical
Include
representations,
two phases,
with
an
music
evasion and
changing
an attack phase. For
speed,
the evasion phases, arrows
intense
come
and
down
and
screen and you have to
uncertain,
hit to the beat.
matching
The
the nightmare that
more accurate you are, the more MP you gain. It's not just PDR though. The enemy will send attacks or mines down the screen that you have to avoid. Additionally, the enemy will strike back, shaking up, splitting apart, or moving around your arrows, or attacking you with visual debuffs that block your field of view. The physical gameplay of the attacking phase is a more simplified system. It's a section of the song where the player has their own solo and can launch an attack on the enemy instead of having to avoid incoming attacks. Each individual spell or support attack has its own unique instrumentation, though the backing track and melody is still the same. For example, we have the gecko known as Drift uses a bass, so their support attack will include similar sounding instruments for all of them. Additionally, the elemental charts are also unique and tailored to the specific element they represent. For example, the ice chart has mainly long, slow hold notes, while the lightning chart has a lot of rapid taps and holds. The phases switch between evading and attacking until the enemy is defeated. This will usually take between 2 to 3 attacking phases, but the general amount is dependent on the player's level, the base damage dealt, and their accuracy that the player has to hit the notes, as well as their overall skill. At the start of each attack phase, you choose an attack out of 3 elemental spells: fire, ice, and lightning, and one support spell, which is based on the partner that you choose for battle. This choice will modify the enemy's elemental state. Elemental states in the battle system are modifiers added to the enemy after a player's attack that can influence the player's damage dealt and taken, and are dependent on the elements the player has used up until that point. The main states can lead to secondary, more powerful states if used in the right combination. Each support attack does less damage than the player's elemental attacks, but they have significant utility outside of the standard elemental attacks. The 4 different partners, the monkey known as Barriera, has a plant element that boosts the player's defense. Gecko, the Rift, the gecko has a worm elemental attack that boosts the player's MP meter. Dog Stamp with the player's default elements, they're playing different combinations of both damage and special effects.
All right, and now we will take you through some gameplay footage. Hopefully that the mic issues, the audio like feedback, that gets taken care of. But we'll see. This is going to be a little bit difficult because I have to be a little bit further away. Try moving the mic. Hopefully that the mic issues. Can you guys still hear me okay? I don't know why I'm asking. I can't really get an answer. So this is our, it's temporary title screen. It's just for us to be able to jump to things for the film. So the first thing that we're going to be showing off is the new battle and overworld chamber we created. We have a story segment that we're going to jump right into. Past the halfway point of the game, this is the second major area that the player character is going to be going through. And this is actually already included. We're going through WebEx and an HDMI cable, so it might be a little bit laggy. We'll see how it all turns out.
So one
Okay. So this is just a reference on a battle that we're going to be making. This is the sixth battle. We have the other five done, but we've shown off most of them previously. So we're showing off the new stuff in this presentation. So this fight is against the concept of true endpoints. Most of your team doesn't get through. It's just you taking your turn. So most fights follow the same pattern of two evasion phases and then two attack phases. So an evasion phase and attack phase. to this, we're continuing with the story. And as you can see, the characters have little talking animations that move back and forth. The mouse moves, they have emotions. So this is eventually the intro. As you can move around, it's like different people available. This is the entry for the first area boss, the third battle that you're going to be facing this game. And the narrative purpose behind this is you were saving Rick, who was an old friend and partner from previous instrument mates. Once you sing along with yes, the crew of Thunder. So I'll show the different notes for you just for the sake of showing everybody it exists. To wrap this up, the next things we have planned, there's not too much more that needs to be added. Effectively, there's one more battle that we're missing out on, which is the final boss battle against the Nightmare. It's mechanically the same as every other battle, except that it's more on a grander scale of like, camera moving around, dynamically changing throughout the fight as you chase this beast around the area. Additionally, we're implementing a choice system, as you can see on the bottom corner. These choices will affect how characters react to you. They will affect how various scenes play out, and they might even change how the next battle is going to go. And of course, always standard bug fixes and stuff. That's to be expected. A lot of polish that still needs to be done. We've recently revamped how most of our numbers are recorded, which has led to a complete overhaul of a lot of what's already been there. And we're working through that at the moment. But since all the fundamentals are already there, we can move forward pretty easily. So yeah, this is our team. All right, you got any questions?
So just I will start with a comment for the next team. Don't watch on YouTube when you are presenting because it creates a loop. Don't use your microphone when you are presenting, like you're on the stage, because people online cannot watch the stream because it creates a loop. So it's really unfortunate because the game is really good, the music is really good, and I don't know how much people have heard about it, but yeah, it's a bit sad. But outside of this, my question was about the potential audience of your game. I want to know, according to you, what the narrative adventure part of the game bring to the game, what will make a player prefer buying your game than just playing Stepmania.
So, in its sense, when you play Stepmania, you're playing it solely for the rhythm game purpose of it. You just want to go and play all the charts that you like to play,
and Get Out. It's a standard rhythm game, standard rhythm game deal. In Savior of Dreams, we take that concept a step further and we introduce a story mechanic. And there's an entire narrative element now that the players can have the option to go through. I say option because we're including a specialized menu after the fact where you can just choose which songs you want to play. So if you want to play this in a similar vein as Stepmania, you have the option to play it like a standard rhythm game with just these songs. However, that's nowhere near the full experience. You don't get the background for any of these things, why they're happening, etc. In its core, this is much more than just a Stepmania. We've introduced a ton of RPG elements, the entire attack system, the experience system, your scores and partners, all these stuff that are normally just like standard just scoring measurements in Stepmania or DDR are now integral to the gameplay itself. And the narrative enforces that and enhances it by making it interesting. As you go through the story, it is designed to engage the player. You want to save these animals. They're cute. They're in trouble. And you play more songs as you save them. So you're naturally drawn to it in that perspective. General game audience that we were aiming for is not like the hardcore rhythm fans because they're in a league of their own, but the standard rhythm game community is in. There are other games out there that are rhythm games with story elements in it, but none of them really take it to a level of introducing more mechanics on a more fundamental level, like Savior of Dreams is doing with its RPG elements.
Thank you.
You mentioned that there were going to be some different options with the narrative stuff. How much were you thinking that the story was going to branch once that gets implemented?
Minimal, not major story branches, mostly just reactions based off of what you're doing and maybe making the main thing that's going to change are damage modifiers. So if you are, mean to the person you're trying to save, they're not going to like you very much, and their attacks are going to do more damage to you. If you're very nice to them, they're going to be more sympathetic to you helping them, and they're going to be doing less damage to you. It's there to help you. It's less of a narrative thing and more of a gameplay perspective thing.
For the elemental attacks and the special that you get from your partner, do those have unique instrumentation and note structure?
Yes.
Okay.
They all have separate charts, and they all have specialized instruments going along with them.
Okay.
The notes for the attack charts are actually charted to those unique instruments. So when you're playing like Ariera, the monkey's chart, she uses a saxophone, so all the notes are charted to the saxophone notes.
Okay, cool.
I have a question.
Oh, no, go first and then online.
Not particularly telegraphed. The boss has attack animations and stuff, but they're mostly reserved for changes of like phase, and like the arrow notes will start moving after that point. Because there are so many mines and hazards in each hazard being the mines that are coming down the attacks. There are so many of them. If we telegraphed like all of them, or even at just like major points when they come down, it would just be constantly in the attack animation. So it's like exclamation points all over the screen. So leaving it blank and just having the notes come down, they're visually distinct from the arrows. We've made sure to make them colors that don't conflict with them.
Okay, so online, was it Sarah?
Yeah, so I had a question about the music. So the music is really good and it's really interesting to listen to. I was wondering what the music direction process was like, especially since the different songs and the different levels seem to be so distinct from each other and very unique. And I'd love to hear what your thought process was in creating such varied tracks for the game.
I can speak about that. As the composer, I wanted each music track to really show what was happening in the story. That's why they're all so different. Every level has a completely different situation. The process really is, I find instruments that fit what the feeling of the general situation. So for example, the rift battle, the big dragon, the fear is thunderstorms. So I figured a rock sounding song would be really fast and energetic to imitate the nature of lightning. That is just one of the examples of some direction. Another example is in the fight with the wolf whisper. There is strings and violins, and each whisper is represented by a low cello, and chime in the fight is represented by a violin. And they just play off of each other. And that kind of symbolism is everywhere in the game.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
I think so. In any case, we have to jump to the next presentation. So thank you. And
Okay, cool. So, good morning. This is In Between the Sun and the Sea. So, In Between the Sun and the Sea is a narrative and puzzle game that explores Violet's imagination. Violet is the main character in the game who is experiencing a rare form of color blindness called tritanopia after an accident. Playing from a first-person perspective, the game explores her interpersonal relationships as well as her personal growth as she goes through this experience. The player is able to navigate the game using the WASD keys and the mouse.
Things that were easy to render as well as easy to view as the player. Most levels, when you step into them, are easy to read because of the low poly, simple aesthetic. One of the other things that we had to focus on for the art was the color palette. Considering the fact that Violet has tritanopia, or color blindness, every color we use interacts differently with the color blindness, so everything we choose gets affected in some way by that. And one of the other things, each level takes place within Violet's imagination, so that gave us some freedom on where we chose to take the levels. And so each level can have a drastically different setting while still feeling familiar, carrying the art style across. For each level, we have separate audio tracks, which Justin can touch on.
Yeah, so every song in the game is slightly different, but it's meant to have one large overarching feel to the entire thing. So every single song is going to have different instruments that might apply better to that specific situation. For example, in the bedroom, there are instruments that you might imagine falling asleep to, like mallet instruments or harps or things that are a bit softer. In the space song, there are synths and stringed instruments like guitars that happen at the same time to make it seem both distant and also familiar at the same time. And by contrast, the library sounds a little bit more like a classical piano piece. It's not an actual piano piece, but since you don't really have music in a library, it was the closest thing that we could think of that would fit like sort of a high class, like peaceful atmosphere. And we also have another case, like our tutorial song, which takes place in a void inside of our main character's mind. It's not an actual space, so it's meant to feel a bit abstract. The meter is kind of weird, and it's not very concrete where all the beats are. So as far as sound effects go, we don't have that much in the way of sound effects, but we do have things for like lever pulling, or when you complete a task, you'll hear a jingle, or when you clear a level, you'll hear like a chime that brings you back to the main area. And beyond that, we do have spoken dialogue that's been recorded for all of our different scenes. So we have that, and hopefully that dialogue will explain more about what Violet's interactions with other characters are like and what her personality is like, and it'll help build the story and world around that.
So, growth can be seen within both Violet and the NPCs throughout the game. For one, within the space level, we have the mom NPC. She, at the beginning of the level, starts off pretty hostile and is very critical of Violet's aspirations and her passions. Slowly, as the level progresses, the player starts to see that the mom is starting to recognize Violet's potential, and by the end of the game, she finally respects. By the end of the level, sorry, she finally respects her daughter's wishes. In the snow level, the dad is present. Unlike the mom, he is consistently supportive of Violet. However, he's also very insistent on her maintaining her independence, instead of letting go of that aspect of herself because she has developed tritanopia. So throughout the level, he wants to show her that her tritanopia doesn't change her as a person and that she is still the same person she was before her accident. And lastly, we have Leo, who is in the library level, and Leo is Violet's best friend. He's actually the character who threw a baseball accidentally at Violet's head, which caused her tritanopia to start developing. His character arc is that at the beginning, he's very afraid that Violet won't need him anymore because he sees her as a very independent person who won't really need his support after everything that's happened. But the level resolves with Violet reassuring Leo that no matter what, she will always need and want his support. So all of the storylines are ending with the final level where the characters reconvene in the bedroom and deliver their last bits of dialogue. The final level is in the bedroom level, and it serves as a wrap up for the NPC's storylines with Violet, but it also leaves the player to speculate on the trajectory of Violet's life after the game ends.
In the tutorial level, the player will learn the basic mechanism in the game, that is how to control the movement of the player and camera, and how to interact with other objects and NPCs. This screenshot is from the tutorial level. It is the puzzle in it. This puzzle requires the player to walk in a certain path, which is hard to memorize, so that they need to take notes outside the game in order to finish this puzzle. And after this puzzle is conquered, the player will be aware of taking notes when solving harder puzzles in the later levels.
So the bedroom acts as a hub from which the other levels within the game can be accessed. This also acts as the setting for the final level of the game. So the bedroom is the place where Violet is recovering and the environment from which she accesses memories related to the objects in her room and the people in her life.
The space level is where the player explores Violet's relationship with her mother. As Sarah mentioned earlier, Violet mothers love her but is stern, skeptical of her interests, and sometimes hostile. Then, as Violet progresses through the level, she becomes more open-minded and eventually supportive of Violet. The level presents this story as the player completes 3 light-based puzzles. The narrative is sprinkled in between these sections, so the backstory functions as a sort of reward for completing the puzzles. The puzzles are based around combining lights to match a certain color. The player needs to get through a door to progress, which is highlighted in a certain color. And then the player can use the levers shown in the puzzle to control different colored lights to match the color on the door. For example, the first puzzle has the player combining the yellow and green lights to make a lime green. Once the player has finished the level, Violet's mother will appear in the room scene.
The puzzle of this level is a series of book stacks where the player searches the library to find books and match the stacks. When the effects of Violet's tritanopia are more intense, the player can use the symbols on the cover of the books to identify how to recreate the stacks. And the player can choose to solve the puzzles in this level in any order, as this level is more focused on exploring the scene and using their notes and their memory to keep track of the desired solutions.
The snow level introduces Violet's father into the narrative. In contrast with her mother, Violet's dad is a bright source of positivity and fun in her life. The level features a maze, and Violet's dad can be found in it, giving Violet words of encouragement. This enforces the idea that her father is a positive force in her life. The layout of the maze is shown to the player beforehand, so this once again encourages the player to use the notebook as it will help them get through the puzzle. The color aspect of the puzzle is pretty simple. The maze is incompletable because there are large colored barriers blocking the way, and the player can remove said barriers by pulling the different colored levels at the start of the maze. Then the player must choose the correct path corresponding to the lever that they pulled.
Can you hear it okay over there? Okay, good. Okay. So this is the main menu of the game where the player can choose from a few select options. So first I'm going to pick the tutorial level. In between each level, the player will see loading screen art to the level they're about to load into, but only 2 of those pieces have been implemented, so right now you don't get that. This is the tutorial level, which takes place immediately after Violet's accident. Inside her mind, it features Violet's consciousness, where she's given advice on how to progress through the entire game. In the final version, all the dialogue, including the lines in this level and any future ones that aren't voiced, will be fully voice acted. So the game's teaching how to drag things down, ready to play, game. The game tells me that it's important to take notes here. So upon seeing this, I could just, try to walk through and, I'll fall, die. So maybe I should try to follow this path. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to take notes on the path. So it seems like I'm going to go up 2, the left 2, down 2, the left 3 blocks, 4, to the right, 7 blocks, down 1, right 2, all the way up, and I can, so let's try following 2, 3, 4, 7, way. So the tutorial level serves as a way to make sure the player knows that they need to take notes throughout the game, or else as things progress, it will become increasingly more difficult. So this is Violet's bedroom, which acts as the main level selection screen for the game. So if I look around the room, you'll notice there are certain objects that glow as I hover over them. These objects represent different levels the player can go to, where Violet explores an area representing different aspects of her life. So first, I'll go to the snow level. Again, this is some of the artwork that I'm going to put together. So here's the snow level where where the player will meet and interact with Violet's father. This is Violet's father in his current state. In the future, he'll have a fully fleshed out model, and the music you're currently hearing isn't the music the player will hear in the final version. This is a placeholder track from another level we'll visit a bit later. Again, this will all be fully voice acted. So walking through the level, we can see a series of levers against the wall and what appears to be a map. So if I flip the lever, you'll see the lever corresponds to a color. So as I learned in the tutorial level, it's probably a good idea to take note of things. So I'm going to take a note based on the symbol I see and the color that appears. So this one will be red, this one is green, blue, and magenta. So here. So let's say I try to go through and let's just say I try this. I'm going towards the green side. So in the future, Violet's father will appear throughout the maze, and there will be more visual landmarks to show the player's progress. Okay, so here we've hit a barrier of a certain color. So I know that there was a green switch, so I'll restart the level. And maybe this time I'll flip the lever that has the green. And I'll try to go through it again. As we approach where the barrier was, we can see that it's now been lifted, and this is usually around where Violet's father would be here as well. And so, because I've taken note of the path, I can now find the exit. So Violet's dad is here at the end of the maze, next to our cabin. He'll be here waiting once you complete the maze. So we approach it, we'll go back to Violet's room. You can see the loading screen art. So Violet's father is now sitting here, comforting Violet as she recovers, signaling the completion of the snow level. So this is a recurring aspect in our game where the featured character from whatever levels the player has completed will appear. One thing you might notice is that the effect of Violet's Straightnopia has begun to intensify. This is another recurring aspect of our game, where once the player completes each level, the effects will continue to intensify, making the game more difficult without taking notes. One thing we're going to include in the next update is dynamic music in Violet's room, meaning that instead of the same music track you hear now, each character's presence in Violet's room will bring a new instrument to the background track, which will allow the player to feel their progression through the game. So now let's go to the space level. At the start of this level, you'll notice Violet's mother, whom Violet has a voice-acted interaction with, so I'm going to look around the level and let the audio play for a minute.
Oh, I can't remember the last time I saw a sky full of stars. How long has it been since I've gone outside?
Is this your idea of a good time, Violet? Carelessly gallivanting through space? It's as if you're always somewhere else, floating away. All I've ever asked is for you to stay grounded.
Give me a break. I'm not even allowed to have fun within my own imagination. Since I can't stargaze from my room, I figured I'd explore the cosmos in my mind.
Space is just a void. You're wasting your time. When will you learn to move on with your life?
So here we have another color-based puzzle for the player to solve. So I noticed that the symbols on these switches are the same that we saw in the snow level. So I know already that this one should be red. This one should be green. And these two are new ones, so I'll take note that this one yellow and this one is the blue one. Seeing you can combine the different colors, so it matched the color of the door, which solves puzzles. So at the end of the game, once all the levels have been completed, the player will experience a final cutscene featuring all the characters. Before the player can click on the door and leave the game. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to manually skip through having to progress through the game, so we can just show that off. I'm going to fully intensify Tradenopia and show Violet's bedroom. So this is where all the characters will be. You can see Violet's mother here. Kind of cheated our way through the end. And again, all of these voice lines will be voice acted, and these models will be fully fleshed out in the next update. And then the player, once the dialogue is complete, the player can choose to click on the door and exit, marking the end of the gameplay demonstration. Now, some credits, but essentially that's the end of our presentation. Are there any questions?
So, well, one question that come back a lot on the chat, so I will ask you, is so the first part is, can you really get tritanopia from a head injury? And second, have you talked with anyone who has tritanopia?
I can answer this. So, at the very, very beginning, like before the game went into production, when it was still at the pre-pitch stage, I spoke with some people with color blindness, although there were other forms of color blindness. Tritanopia is very rare, and it's typically not genetic. It can be caused by a lot of different things, including like one of the ways it can develop is by a serious brain injury, like head injury, head trauma. But yeah, it's a little bit different, and it's actually much more rare than the other two forms, which are the other two main forms that most people know about, which are typically genetic.
Thank you. I wanted, so I have to take my note. So, well, two questions, but the first, okay, the first one is for which player is this game made? What kind of player you want to what kind of audience you want to attract with this game? And the second one is I know the fact that the game evolved in terms of visual and also say playfulness. Did you take into account this change? How did you take into account the relation that the player will have with the game, and how it fit with the narrative? so yeah, because the gameplay and the visual both evolve in the game, but most the visual have a certain impact on the gameplay. So how did you take that into account in your game? What choice to make? Okay, because we don't see we are color blinded, but we need to solve puzzle with color. How the player will react with that, and yeah, what was your thought about the relationship that you create between the player and the game?
So one thing we wanted to reinforce is the idea of taking gameplay. So we wanted to make sure that as a player just in case if they didn't feel the need to take notes, the gameplay and the visuals change, that need becomes more intense as the Tritanopia progresses. So the player also has the option to go back and revisit previous levels that they had already completed, and take stuff that maybe they had missed that could help them in future levels. And can you repeat your first question?
The audience. The audience. What kind of?
So I feel because this is a more relaxed, like puzzle solving visual novel type, and we kind of felt that we wanted to attract a more casual audience, especially those who are looking to maybe get a bit of a better understanding of some of the difficulties that might come with being colorblind.
On the second question you mentioned as well was while the color blindness is something that might feel frustrating for the player at some point, I think that is something that it fits the game a lot because the game is focusing on the color blindness and it's educational in a way about it. It'll feel akin to what it would feel like if you were experiencing color blindness yourself. It would feel frustrating at times. You wouldn't know how to get through certain tasks without your former ability to see color.
Thank you.
How did you guys make the fire in the snow level? It was really cool.
I want to answer that one.
I can talk about that. So it's just a particle system in Unity. The particle is just a pentagon that has like 3D star rotation and random and like a force applied to it as it's generated. And then the trick to really making it look like a fire is having it fade from red to yellow, and that fade makes it look pretty good. Thank you.
As for the is Violet's bedroom naturally painted in the shades of Tritanopia, at the very beginning before any filter?
No, so that's actually a filter that's applied over the camera.
Gotcha.
And so every time the player completes a level, it'll just increase the filter over and over again. So if you were to say complete a certain level and then go to another one, if you were to come back to that first one, the effect of Tritanopia would be more intense because you completed the two, even though you're back to that original level, because it's just a filter on the camera.
Gotcha. And does it just statically change? Is it more? How do I put this? Before a level, it's 0 filter, and then after a level, it's 0.5 filter. Or as soon as you exit the level, does it fade into more Tritanopia?
So it
gradually increase.
So I mean the effect does gradually. It's not just 0, 1, off, right? And it does kind of fade in the sense that the intensity of it gets stronger. So you might have noticed at the very end, right before I went back to the bedroom, our little shortcut turns on the intensity all the way. So it is kind of, do you mean, when you say gradual, do you mean does it fade into it?
Yeah, when you're in the scene, does it go slowly?
Okay. No, it doesn't do that. It changes between levels.
Gotcha. Okay.
After we mentioned music, we want the music change a little bit when you get back to the bedroom. So we another signifier to show that you're progressing and everything.
Gotcha. Okay. That'll be really neat.
Just to add to that point, one thing that you might have noticed is that the Tritanopia is a lot more obvious in certain levels than in others, just because of the color palette chosen. And we found that the bedroom level doesn't really show it off that great, so that's why we wanted to add more visual and audio cues that you're progressing through the game, such as different instruments and the characters in the bedroom.
Two questions from one of the chat. Does Violet have a design? And if yes, does Violet have a design?
If you mean a model,
Yeah,
no, she
model.
does not.
No. Okay. And what was your puzzle making process?
When we first started, we knew because we wanted to explore Tritanopia through the gameplay, that we knew the puzzles were going to be mainly color based. And in each level, we wanted to force a different kind of interaction with colors. So initially, our first one was just the space level, where the player could combine a series of lights to create a solution and then complete the puzzle. So when we were creating that, we had to consider what it would be like without and with a very intense level of tritanopia, which is why we introduced the symbols, because we felt that not only that was a good way to translate what the colors actually are, as opposed to what they look like, but also reinforce the idea that taking notes is important throughout the gameplay. So if the player earlier on through their gameplay does manage to take the notes, as the tritanopia intensifies, it will be easier to solve than if they started taking notes later on or if they just straight up didn't take notes.
Okay, so any other question? No. So thank you. And
Thank you.
for the one who are on YouTube, we see you in half an hour. See you. Mira, stop to share content for a second. Yeah. At the end of the
Okay, welcome back everyone. Welcome back people that are watching us on YouTube. So as said this morning, we still have three projects to present. It's an amazing project. As I said, we are on the alpha version of the project, so it's normal to have some things that need to be polished in the last months. But the alpha represents the entire content of the game. Doesn't mean that they will show you the entire content of their game, but they can if they want. And it's to give you an idea of what will be the project, what is the, let's say, the size of the project that you will see in 1 month. So we are already late again, so no long intro, and let's start with their diary.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Hello everyone, today we'll be showing you our game called Dear Diary. So Dear Diary is a 2D top-down puzzle-solving RPG that tells the story of Kai. Kai must relive his traumatic past through his diary, as each day a new entry is written in his diary by someone other than himself. Kai is then transported to a new world from the diary that looks eerily like his childhood home and memories. From there, he must escape these memories by finding and creating paths through them by himself or with the help of his friends. There are 4 puzzles that the player must solve to escape these memories. The first puzzle demonstrates to the player what power Kai and his friends can use in the diary world. The second puzzle is an ice puzzle where the player slides across the ground until they collide with an object. And the third puzzle is a fire puzzle where the player is unable to move backwards because of the flames blocking his path. And then the final puzzle utilizes all 3 mechanics from the previous puzzle, where the player must then solve.
Depending on how the player solves the puzzle by either using Kai's special ability or instead relying on his friend's powers, it changes Kai's story and actually alters the outcome of the whole game. We have four main characters in our game. The first is the protagonist, Kai. He is a bit socially anxious. He likes to play video games. He has three friends and goes to a school called Calvaro University. One of his friends, her name is Nova. She's also a student at Calvaro University who had to retake a few classes and has been in her sophomore year for 2 years. But I met her through his friend Simon, who shares a computer science class with him. He is the mentor of the story, and it guides Kai through his experiences in the diary world by teaching him how to use the diary pages in puzzles and more. Next, friend Simon. He is Kai's first friend from high school, and they met in a history class. They've been the closest friends of the four and longest friends. Kai definitely trusts him the most out of all of his friends and shares the most with Simon. And Nico is the last friend who Kai, his lab partners with in his science class. He's a bit optimistic. He's definitely more upbeat than the rest of the group. And he's very physically strong, so he likes to weight train a lot and can push things around when he's in the puzzles with Kai. We also have a few campus students and campus staff. Some of these include on the left Ayana and Lucy, and on the right we have Ryan and Kyle.
So each day will begin with Kai waking up in his bed and usually going to check his diary afterwards. And so after picking up the diary page, Kai can go around the campus and talk to others, including some of his friends, that he can meet in places like the dining hall or the library or lecture hall. All right, and so the character can pick up these pages, which can either create a block to fill in the hole, or destroy an obstacle. And in the puzzle, the player moves in a tile-based movement, each moving only a certain distance every time they move. And here in the first puzzle, since Kai has only learned about these new powers, he can't really use them yet. So for now, Nova is taking over the job of using these powers.
Apologies, I had cropped this video and I guess it didn't export that way, but now we'll be showing off two versions of the second day's puzzle. So there's a version where you go by yourself because Kai is too afraid to lose his friends on the way. And there's a version where you go with Simon and he helps you solve the puzzle using switches and levers around the room.
So normally when Kai goes with Simon, Kai can stand on those little buttons to disable some of the obstacles in the way. And after that, Simon can freely move to the switch over there on the right to disable these blocks so that he can go back and get Kai, and then they can move together afterwards. Also, in every other puzzle except for the first puzzle, there's a key that the player has to get to unlock the door before they can exit. Here we show off the diary path.
And for the last part of our demonstration, we'll be showing a bit of the end where Kai doesn't bring any of his friends along the way and ends up going a little bit crazy.
So on this last day, each of the puzzles have a mechanic that's reminiscent of previous days. For example, this puzzle has the mechanic of the first day.
Any questions?
Thank you for this presentation. So I see that you might have some technical issue that happen. That's okay. So I will just ask you. I don't know how much I write. I think one or two questions, and then we'll give the time for the audience and people on YouTube. So I wanted to know, yeah, about the puzzle. First, I wanted to know on which basis are you able to evaluate, rank the difficulty of your puzzle? So what are the variables that make you think that puzzle A is more difficult than puzzle B? So that's the first part of the first question. And the second part is, how many puzzles will you think that you will be able to make with this concept without before becoming a bit redundant?
So the difficulty scale of the puzzles relies on how many puzzle blocks you're able to use within each puzzle. Like, for instance, in the second puzzle, you're allowed to use a total of 3 blocks. And in the third day, you're allowed to use 4 blocks. And then on the fourth day, 4 blocks as well. But since you're doing 3 puzzles in one day, that's why we kept it at that. And for how many puzzles that you could probably make, I would say once you start going past 6 blocks of creation and 6 blocks of destruction, that's when things start to get a bit redundant.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was, what do you want to express with this story? What do you want to say?
Well, in the story, Kai goes through a trauma in his past in which he causes an accident that causes the death of someone very close to him. And he, despite knowing that this was an accident and that it was that person's will to save him and sacrifice themselves, he feels a lot of guilt about that and does not forgive himself for it, even past all of those years. And we want to show that it's okay to forgive yourself and that you can create yourself a new family with your friends when times get tough.
So I wanted to know how much exploration your game allows and what you do to encourage the player to explore.
So we have three different areas of campus. There's an area with the dorm building, science building, dining hall we saw in the beginning, and then there's the lecture area with the art building and the lecture hall in the field. There's also a library area. There's also a library area that is one of the more important parts of the campus as it's utilized in the end day a lot. But we encourage exploration with the NPCs around campus, like the students and staff who walk around and kind of just give you a little more context about the campus itself. A lot of the NPCs have their own little stories and personalities that make the campus a bit more lively and interesting.
Yeah, you sort of answered my last question, but were you planning on putting more NPCs within the campus? Because I saw there was only a couple in there, and are you gonna be able to are you gonna be able to see some progression through their own stories to show maybe some reflection or other character development in the game?
So currently I have created two very fleshed out NPCs that have different things to say on every day, but most of the other NPCs are kind of one-liners, and I hope to create more fleshed out characters, maybe give them different things to say every day, like the other two characters, Ayana and Lucy. But they do change every day. You get to see a bit more of their character fleshed out as the story goes on.
So this is more of a technical question, but how are you guys actually handling the changing of character portraits from different kinds of expressions? Like are you guys just like full on swapping out the sprites to a totally different one, or some alpha blending? It's like kind of how's that working out?
Yeah, we just swap each sprite for each particular emotion that each character has.
So I was wondering, alongside the NPCs in the overworld, were you going to implement or add any items or like environmental interactions where you click or interact with something and it like, gives you some dialogue about the place, or is it just going to be solely NPC conversation?
There will also be item or environment dialogue as well, such as like things around Kai's room, like what the day looks like outside, his wardrobe, and uh, his nightstand that has a picture of him and his dad. Um, but yeah, we will have more item interactions as well.
Seeing as there's a decent amount of dialogue in the game, have you considered doing voice acting for the lens?
Not something I have really considered, but I might take it into account moving forward with the game.
So I just want to ask, does like bringing friends to the level actually make the puzzle solving easier, or like does the game encourage the player to like bring friends to the puzzle? Because
heard you guys talk about like you can bring friends to the puzzle. There's like two different versions of the puzzle. The one has the glass for fish level.
It's more of a balance of like a pro and con, because a pro of bringing your friend is that it's a more simpler mechanic that you have to worry about, but the con is that you lose your friend.
Oh, okay.
And whereas with the diary, it's a bit more of a difficult process figuring out exactly like which blocks you need to destroy and which holes you need to fill in. But the pro there is that you get to get a bit more narrative along with preserving your friends.
Thanks.
Okay, one last.
Yeah. So did you guys plan on having some sort of visual indicator for when Kai is being accompanied by a character? Because I was a little surprised to see that Nora was speaking when she like Nova was speaking when she wasn't visibly there. I'm sorry. Did you guys plan on having some sort of like visible way to see that Kai has someone with him? Because I couldn't really tell that Nova was there, and it kind of surprised me when she popped up in dialogue.
We will be trying to implement that so that it actually looks like they're talking to each other.
Thank you. So, thank you. You have there are also some interesting comments on YouTube, so I recommend you. I will post it on your Discord, but I recommend you to watch them because yeah, they are really. I think they could be really relevant for your game. So next presenter.
So this is our game Troubled Seas about the pirate adventure. So for Troubled Seas, you along with two other players, 2 to 4 player game, are a pirate crew traveling across the Atlantic Ocean on a quest to find Blackbeard's anchor. Once you find the anchor, you will realize that it is cursed. In this game, players must work together cooperatively in this roguelike nature of the game to complete each level along the line. If a level is failed, it will be sent to the beginning of the game. This really encourages camaraderie and teamwork and communication between each player in the game.
So, the crew, in the beginning of the game, the captain tells the crew that this treasure once belonged to the pirate Blackbeard, who has long since died. They sail off to the island, and after they dig up the treasure, they discover that it is cursed, and now their souls are damned forever to Davy Jones's locker. Luckily, the captain tells them that there may be a way that they can dispel the curse and free their souls from damnation before it is far too late.
Now, we've seen all of the different visuals and different areas that pirates have been in, but one main thing that pirates do have is music. We have sea shanties, we have different locations, we have a variety of different sounds that come from pirate ships, from cannons to fixing ships to loading it to lights and fuses to skeletons and whatever or you could find in a pirate's adventure. Now, most of these things have different sounds and they have different things that go along with them. And most of them are also exemplified in our gameplay.
We also have tasks for you to complete that will pretty much help dictate whether or not you actually win or lose, such as loading up and firing cannons to support your ship, picking up daily treasure, and among other things. We also have a dynamic environment that is going to force the players to kind of adapt to their surroundings, such as holes appearing in your ship that are blocking certain pathways, or like puzzle elements such as rotating stairs, forcing you to kind of plan out a path ahead of time to your destination. There's also some live AI elements in there that are kind of actively fighting against you to make you lose. And finally, we have some slight branching story paths to allow for some variety in what you're doing story element wise.
Here we have our amazing crew that brings the life to our game. We didn't want players to feel like all of our playable characters were just the same character but with a different color palette. We wanted our characters to have depth to them, so we made them all unique from one another by giving them various clothes, accessories, and backgrounds. For example, Mary Reed over here has beautiful red hair and is the daughter of a nobleman who has always longed to be a pirate. She even ends up becoming one of the most notorious female pirates. Thanks to this, our characters are more than just simple crewmates.
For the 2D art asset, we're going to more into a cartoonish style. To the left, it's the Blackbeard character, and to the right, it's the captain, the main player in 2D art. And these will be also showing our website.
Expand the game's narrative lore even further to have outside of the game website where players can go and find more about the characters and the environments of the game. Here's a character screen for Mary Reed. Also, there'll be text and backgrounds for each level of the game and some other lore back in there to help with players really connect to the world more than just having to play the game. They have an outlet outside of the game to connect to the game world even more. So, the world of troubled seas. We know that the pirate aesthetic is a strong aesthetic, and players are going to want to see a lot of different environments, a lot of the famous environments that make pirates so special. So you've seen some of the prototype images, you've seen some of the concept art. Let's show you some of the stuff in the game. So this is the deck. This is the place you call home. Yeah, so on the deck, you'll have two tasks. One to repair the ship as firing shots come in towards you. They will be blocking your path, so you must repair them fast if you want to move around the ship efficiently. The other task is to fire cannons back at your enemy. You have to do this in order to complete the level and to make sure you're moving on. This is the ship's graveyard. This is the ship's graveyard. This is a haunted island. It's dangerous because at high tide, the water just covers the top of the island and the lights attract ships, making them crash upon the shores. It's haunted. You're not as alone as you might think here. Yeah. So on this level, there'll be skeletons coming out of these tombs, trying to attack the cursed anchor as you are trying to unearth it. This is Blackbeard's pirate crew as they have been stranded here, now protect the cursed anchor. You see here is cursed anchor you're trying to dig up as you defend it with your cannon.
Back on deck, you're not always fighting in the best of conditions. Sometimes you're attacked in the middle of the night, and you have to make do with knowing your way around the deck you've played already, and lanterns.
Yeah, so as Max said, players and not have to work together, a lot more communication this level, as one player would definitely have to be carrying a lantern around to show the other players around and see the environment they're working with. It's the same task as the first level with preparing the deck and firing the cannon.
And the last level is the jungle, the ruins in the jungle of an abandoned civilization. There is a poison upon the air. The strange plants that grow in the area may offer an antidote. Unfortunately, paths to them are sometimes blocked by strange clockwork mechanisms.
Yes, so as Max said, teammates will have to work together around this environment to find the plants. You can see here, that hold the fruit and the antidotes. You have to combine 3 different fruit types in order to make the antidote. As the players are playing, they slowly lose health, and this health can be restored by eating one of the plants, which will then stunt your growth to finish the level, but continue on the level, so you can keep trying to beat it. These staircases that you see are only rotated by levers, so it also encourages more teamwork and communication, as one will have to pull the lever and calling the shots for which fair they need to go to next.
Now we'll go ahead and take a look at a gameplay video.
So you see here is our main menu with our intro music.
So these flashing pulses that you're seeing on some of these items here, they're giving players some small suggestion on what they're actually doing. Otherwise, I don't have any idea on what they're doing now. Fall easy prey to the waves.
So a little more on the music side. The use of accordions and an acoustic guitar was used for this specific level's theme. And they're used in a way where they're trying to fight each other, in a sense, giving you the idea that you're in the middle of a fight against who knows what.
Players have to carry planks and cannons, cannonballs to the taskers respectively. And if a plank is placed in the cannon, it will give you a garbage shot and damage. If you fail repairing a hole, it will eventually stay in the level and block your path. This encourages players to fix their holes very fast. second player has killed themselves by putting a plank in the cannon, and the other player can attempt to revive. This video, the revive happens to come at the same time as the level ends, so one second to see it. Here's our voting mechanic. Players will be able to read the text and vote on how they like to proceed. Shown here, players can now aim the cannon towards the skeletons that are coming at them. So require teamwork as one cannon. One person will probably need to load the cannon, the other fires. Also, players can use the shovel to dig up the cursed anchor. That'll fill the progress bar. First person to build was the next level is not fully made yet. See here, that is all for our game.
Okay, thank you. So give me just 1 second. I have to switch the sound parameter. Okay. Okay, so thank you for this presentation. So first, yeah, the 3D model and the light are really amazing. It's really beautiful, particularly with the water, the light on the water. So it worked well, and it looked almost professional, like something ready to be sold, almost. So you said you talk about particularly in the, I don't remember, but in the jungle level, temple jungle level, you talk about the interaction between players. So I want to hear more about that. How did you imagine them? What did you find that will be the interesting interaction between players? And what did you try to do to encourage this kind of interaction?
Yeah, so starting at the jungle level, we just had the staircases randomly rotate, which would, after thinking through it and playing through it, we realized that it would be playable by one player. It wouldn't be much communication. Each player could just work by themselves and finish the level. So what we did is iterated on that by adding switches and levers. That's something we can definitely have right now. The menu only has sound and sound effect music levels. It's probably a good thing we can have.
Okay, thank you. And we'll come to the stage where I don't know if you still can. We have been disconnected, so I don't know if you can hear me on WebEx. Give me a sign.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. And so now, give me a few seconds to try to solve the problem on YouTube. I will let you know when it's ready.
All right, we are at the end of the world.
Hi everybody. Thanks for coming today. So we're the team behind the Inn at the End of the World, and without further ado, let's get right into it. So Inn at the End of the World is what we call a quiet apocalypse. It's been a couple decades since the end of modern civilization, and most of the fighting and chaos has somewhat settled down. Most of the remnants of society have rebuilt and gathered together to form three factions. The Brigade, a military faction, the Preachers, a religious faction, and the expats who denied the existence of the apocalypse and tried to live life as close to it was before. Nowadays, the biggest threat to anyone is really just isolation and the loneliness that comes from it. But that's where you come in. As a child, you loved reading old books that talked about stories from before the end of the world. And just something that you always thought was really cool was the taverns and inns that fostered a homely atmosphere full of smiles. Right now, you've just freshly established your inn, so let's do a little bit of exploring.
So and this will start our day. So one thing we can do at first is we can take some time to explore our surroundings. A large part of the game is getting to know the landscape because this is a post-apocalyptic scenario. Um, and so if we want to run a successful inn, one of the first things we need is to make sure that we can actually serve and provide for our guests. So scattered around the landscape, you can find stuff like crates, which contain items, and other. One thing you find that as you play this game is that, well, at first you can essentially pick up anything you want. You have a limited inventory. So we're starting you with 10 slots. And if you can't carry certain items, you might have to drop some things to prioritize what you want to bring back. So now we're going to return to our inn. We will find out we have waiting outside.
So, this guy has a crown and everything, so he seems pretty important, so maybe we should just serve him as best we can, and maybe he'll help spread the word about our inn if we do good enough and our reputation can improve. So you can just, like, talk to him a little bit, get to know him, like what kind of person he is. So, obviously, it's impossible to be completely nice or rude or, neutral towards other people. So sometimes when someone's being a jerk or something, you might want to mouth back a little bit. So this guy looks pretty important and everything. So he seems like the kind of guy to have like guards or protection and stuff. So let's kind of figure out why he doesn't have that right now. Well, so you've talked to him a bit, you've gotten to know like why he's here and what he wants to do, so let's invite him inside. So, now that we've invited him inside, we can go in and interact with him a little bit more.
Continue to talk to Zion to learn a bit more about his backstory. And through these interactions, you start to learn more about these characters.
So yeah, as you talk to all of these characters, you begin to learn more about what kind of person they are and their backstory, and you just have a bunch of different questions that you can ask them and talk to them about. And after that, you get to ask them about what kind of meal they want, and then later on, you can make your food for them.
To properly serve our guests, we need to figure out something to make for them. And so with the ingredients we collected earlier, we can craft a meal or cook a meal. So it turns out with the ingredients we got today, we can't quite make a fabulous meal, but what we can give Zion is pasta, because we did learn earlier that Zion does like hearty foods. Until later, we won't serve them quite yet. Before then, unless we have another character outside. Unfortunately, it's not quite implemented. Brian, if you want to speak a little bit on it.
Yeah, actually, so we have sprited characters, which you can see like Zion, who we met previously. He has like a bit more detail and stuff. And so, Lucy came up with the idea of these faceless characters, and she can explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so these are the majority of the characters you'll meet in the game won't have their own sprites. And some of them will be a little bit more strange than the characters that have their own sprites, but the uniting factor in all of them is that they only visit your inn once, so you don't have to try quite as hard to impress them. I could talk about this particular character, but it doesn't seem like he has any dialogue right now, so I'll just wait.
For the time being, I'm going to drop some of my ingredients on the ground, considering we don't quite need all of these. As you can probably see, the screen is gradually darkening. Essentially, we are seeing a whole day-night cycle going by. Eventually, at that point, it should bring us back to the end. So when it gets too late, we will be automatically returned to the end. This is to stop the player from essentially going around the entire world, collecting as many resources as they want. Kind of min-maxing is to put some pressure on the player. So when we return to the inn, this is the time when we can actually serve our guests. So earlier we decided we would serve pasta. We're gonna do that. We're gonna see what they thought. Oh, sorry. We're actually gonna go to sleep first. And in the morning, we will talk to Xian about how their experience with the inn was. So this is day 2. We will see some new characters this day.
So, depending on how well you treat the guests and how well you meet their needs, like give them food and stuff, they'll have different responses to your service and will give you different rewards and that type of thing. And here you can see that even like this guy who appears to be very rude and kind of a jerk at first can be polite if you treat him well enough.
So in this dialogue, you can see that Xian gives us what appears to be a page. One of the things you can get while you progress through the game by interacting and having good interactions with these characters are different recipes. So what Xian gave us is a recipe for tomato soup. And so before we greet some more guests, we can come check the left side of the world, see what's up there. On this side, we have some berry bushes. Here's we got a potato from. If we continue further, we enter a forest, of course. And then even further, we reach the western boundary of the map. And this is a lake with a fruit tree. And so one of the distinctive elements that you'll see with the layout of our world is that there are unique places to gather resources at the very end. So while it may be time consuming, it may give you an opportunity to craft some items that you couldn't do otherwise. Like here, we see that we just got a lemon, and nowhere else in the world would we be able to do that. So for now, we're gonna return for him. And we're gonna come across a fawn here. We're actually gonna see Xian again.
So, some of these guests are more notable, like we talked about, they're sprited, and they will return multiple times if you provide a good enough service and feed them well enough. But even so, it seems that Zion's back a little bit soon, so let's ask him why that is. So it seems like he's pretty irritated right now, but let's just try to remain professional with things and be polite to him. So it looks like he's had some rough times. So maybe we can use the recipe he gave us last time to make him a meal and help him feel a little better.
And so after our interaction with Zion yesterday, we now have the ability to craft tomato soup. So if we go into our inventory and we use a tomato, some spice, and powdered milk, we craft a tomato soup. So in this way, you can make more complex recipes as the game progresses.
So yeah, we see here that Zion's not as harsh and rude as he was in the beginning. And while at first some of these guests might seem to be jerks, if you put in some time and help them and just be nice and polite, you might find out otherwise that they're not as one-dimensional as they might seem. Anyways, let's see if he still wants that soup. So yeah, like here, as you keep talking to him and like learning more about his backstory, you understand that like these characters have like made sacrifices so that like their life can go on just as best as they could, and they have to take care of other people as well. So that's kind of like, you can see that that's kind of a reason why he's so grouchy, because he's been doing so much work caring for some people that he doesn't even like, just so his sister can, have a better life.
So now it's not quite the end of the day, so we're not gonna give Zion supper quite yet. We go back outside. This is a time that we could spend some more time searching for resources or talking to any other guests that show up. Saw Fawn earlier. For the time being, while it's not quite night, we can go to the other side of the map and try to get some more resources. actually the eastern border of the map, and the unique, I guess, gathering location here is this rusted fridge. And here we got some spices and sugar. So hopefully soon the day will end so that we can serve our captured items to lab. So one thing to keep in mind is that the length of the day you see here is subject to change. For the purposes of this presentation, it's a bit longer than what it probably will be. So we're finally returned to the inn, and at this point, we can serve with the tomato soup again. And at that point, we will end the day. Day 3. And
So I already mentioned this in the chat, but I think it's important to make sure people understand. When the guests leave and they're satisfied, this will increase your inn's reputation, which is the central mechanic and goal of the game. As you increase your reputation, you both get more and harder guests. And if your reputation is above a certain point, your inn will flourish. If it's not, your inn will fail after the end of the game.
that is the our alphabet.
Thank you. So, so yeah, we have a question on the chat, but it has already been answered. So, one second. Okay. So yeah, I just want to know. So again, it's really beautiful. It's like the animation is really great. The atmosphere created by the aesthetic. I'm a bit disappointed to not hear a bit more about that in your presentation. So that's not a question, but I will give you after the question. I want to hear a bit more about your aesthetic choice. Why? I want to hear more. But my question was, I want to know if you have considered developing this game for tablet, iPad, and what made you not doing it, or what is your position about that?
I think it would be a good idea.
Well, I think Anna wanted to answer.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear very well.
Reason that we chose to work with PC rather than Mac is because of unfamiliarity with that kind of development. And so in order to keep the development as streamlined as possible, we stuck to PC. But yeah, tablet would be a very good idea for the future.
I just had a question on whether or not you're thinking about implementing some sort of a time skip where you can skip to the night cycle, because it seemed like there's a lot of waiting around once you have found the resources and interacted with everyone you need to. Are you thinking about implementing in the game, or you want the player to wait out maybe for some reason?
So this is not something we considered, but I think one of our design philosophies going into this was that the player wouldn't need to time skip because time would become such a valuable resource that they wouldn't want to lose it. Clearly, with the alpha build right now, it wasn't quite that, but that is something to fix in future builds.
About how many characters do you think that your game will have, like, to interact with?
There are exactly 15 characters in the game, not counting the player.
When you serve the guests, you serve them the item directly from the inventory. Do you have plans on making the food like exactly like top down? Because it looked kind of awkward with the tomato soup being just the bowl on top of a plate.
Yeah, so the UI has obviously gone through a few iterations as development has gone, so we can definitely change the table serving UI so it's a bit more reasonable with the items that we have.
Thank you.
Hey, so I really love the characters and the environmental art. And I just wanted to know, so obviously your characters tell a lot about the world. I wanted to know how your environment tells about the world and the story in the world.
So we want to form sort of quiet pockets, as we said. So that involves sort of beautiful, natural kind of world that's gone on for a bit longer without humanity's intervention. But there are still the remnants of civilization, but it's all very wide and open and sort of lonely while beautiful.
So, how many characters are able to enter the inn at a time?
The current maximum capacity of the inn is 3 characters. So, but for each day, the number of characters that are getting spawned is a multiplier of the maximum capacity. So the player has to choose certain characters to invite to the end and what characters to dismiss. So yeah.
This is kind of a technical question, but how are you guys handling the movement specifically for the player and the other characters on that horizontal 2D plane?
So the current movement system is a temporary one. So it just according to the player's mouse input, it just moves horizontally. So and until the player reaches the ground in which the player clicked. So yeah, that's the way it is working right now. But we are planning to improve it by implementing some sort of a pathfinding algorithm. So yeah, that's great.
Any like a UI or any sort of like indication for like what time for like basically what time it is or yeah. So like right now we don't have like a sense of what time of day it is, and I think it only notifies you when there's like text pop up. It's like it's at the end of the day, and we don't know anything else. Like how much time do we have left, and yeah.
Great. So again, according to I guess our design philosophy, we want to show rather than tell. So as you could see in the alpha build, the outdoor stages grew darker as time went on. in future builds, we want to make that a bit more prominent.
Yeah.
So you can just look at the sky and say, it's getting really late. And it's not just like getting right?
I'm not sure if this was just something I couldn't tell from watching, but like, does time pass when you're in the inn as well as when you're outside?
So the time passes when the player is outside or inside the inn, but when a new day starts, initially the time pauses until the player exits the inn for the first time.
Someone want to know on the chat how to get the secret endings.
I think that question was a joke. There is no secret ending.
Okay. So let me check if we have something on YouTube.
So secret, it isn't even programmed into the game. Yes.
Okay. So no real question on YouTube. So
Question.
ah, yeah.
Yeah, is there time? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
You guys have made a lot of development. This is great. This is really moving forward. My question is, I find the eating and the going to sleep to be a little, well, upright. So, like, for example, the guest never sits down at the table. They never go into a room. But more importantly, when you go to bed, everybody just kind of stands and then the lights go down. And I was just kind of curious if you guys have thought about, or if this is not part of the development of doing some sort of an animation, or like the innkeeper going up and blowing out the candle or something. Like, is there, are the characters, are the sprites going to perform these actions in any way? And if not, why did you decide against that?
Yeah, at the current moment, they don't have that functionality, but we could definitely implement that in to make it a little bit more smooth, making the transitions between those actions.
I think it may help with some of the, like, embodying the actions that you're performing in the game as a player, and I think it may help with the narrative, because it's so narrative heavy, and since you're showing rather than telling, I think it may fit with that philosophy also, but just a suggestion.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the ones that are watching us on YouTube. So we'll stop the stream now. Let's do a last applause for all the team that we see today. And see you all